Hello, I want to remind you all that this week we are going to be having our Adult Writers Club meeting on the Thursday this week from 8 to 9 p.m. at the library. It's going to be on the 29th. I really would love you all to be there if you can, just because I would love to talk more about the goals of this club, and I would also like to write down all your emails so that way I can consistently remind you each week that Adult Writers Club is happening. We've tried to create some chats in the past and things like that, but it just doesn't seem to be working consistently, so I think a group email would be much more efficient than trying to do a group chat or anything like that, because not everyone checks certain chat boards and things like that. Like, we tried Discord, and we've tried a couple other things. Like, I think we at one point tried Hangouts, and it's just not working too great. So let's just focus on trying to check our emails every week and see whether or not we have Writers Club this week. I would love to see you all there. So today we're going to be talking about tips for writing comedy. I also want to say that on Thursday, I'm more than happy to talk about the Scary Story contest that is coming up and going to be due soon. So please keep that in mind. With that being said, they do accept humorous and comedic entries, so that is part of the reason why I'm doing comedy. If you want more on how to deal with word limits and scary stories in specific, please watch the video I did for the teens. I went super in depth on not only dealing with word limits, but also dealing with horror specific stuff with word limits and stuff you can do for your short story. With tips to writing comedy, I would say the first thing is know your genre and know your genre's cliches, because cliches can be a great way to, if you make fun of those cliches in a fun, unique way, it can definitely make it so the reader goes, oh, I'm familiar with that cliche. It's so funny that you're making fun of that cliche. That's why romantic comedies are so popular, is because of the fact that it's making fun of all those romance cliches, because out of all the genres, romance probably has the most well-known consistent cliches that have been played out time and time again, that people either get tired of or then find humorous when it's made fun of, because they're like, oh yeah, I like that trope, and it's funny that they're acknowledging this trope exists and things like that. So it's important to remember that your genre will help make your sense of humor and comedy unique. Another great example, I believe it was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I could be wrong though. One of the descriptions it uses is the ship flew through the air much in a way a brick could not. And it was absolutely hilarious because of the fact that it's making fun of, the bulky way that most ships look in sci-fi, and yet somehow it flies super, super fast, right? And so as a result, it was extra funny to those who appreciate sci-fi, and especially those who appreciated older sci-fi TV. Because those TV shows did tend to be very big, bulky looking ships. The next thing that you want to look into doing is surprising your audience, giving them that sense of like, oh, I didn't see that coming, in a delightful way. It's kind of like in a horror film where they'll have a cat jump out of the bushes when you totally thought it was the serial killer. And you go from being like, to being like, oh, just a cat. And you start in some ways laughing because you're so relieved that it's a cat, but you're also surprised that it is a cat. And so as a result of that, I would say using surprise can definitely be a great way to do it with your audience. Just make sure you don't surprise them too much, because too much shock value makes people just kind of look straight up shocked. Instead of being funny, it's just panic, and the reader doesn't quite know how to adjust to it. A great example of comedy that I talked about with my teens is the fact that you can do humor in a scary story setting in a fun way. So for example, werewolves have this myth, and I saw this little post the other day of someone playing with this myth and doing a tiny little spiel, that if you throw their clothes at them, and if a loved one specifically throws clothes at a werewolf, they will shift back. And so the person was like, I wrote a little paragraph to go along with that, and it was like this grandmother being like, put your clothes on, Jimmy, and chucking clothes at this rabid werewolf. That makes it seem scary because there's a monster, but it also makes you laugh super hard because you're like, oh my gosh, Grandma, stop throwing clothes at the werewolf. But also if you succeed, that would be great. And so as a result of that, sometimes surprise, like for example, having a grandma throw clothes at a werewolf, you don't see that coming, but once you do, you laugh really hard and you're like, oh my gosh. Next thing to keep in mind, the novel's plot shouldn't be a joke, but have jokes in it. If the whole book is just one big lead up to a big fat punchline at the end, that's ultimately not funny. That just makes the reader feel like they've been duped. And you don't want the reader to feel that way. That's insulting and not fun for the reader. But having jokes that go with your plot and enhance your plot is a fantastic way to go about things. For example, Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett both commonly use humor that delights the audience when they read it, but at the same time, the plot itself is a serious plot. Next thing to keep in mind, meaningful humor. For example, The Princess Bride, life is pain, your highness. Anyone who says differently is selling you something. That line makes people laugh because of the fact that it is so serious and so like you can feel it and you're like, oh, he's right. That kind of sucks, but it's true. And it's so true that you laugh because you're going, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize that was true, but that was well said and well done about something very true. So sometimes being very observant of life and knowing how to, in a quirky and fun and witty way, word something that is hard about life, that is going to make people laugh, and that is going to make people go, oh, wow, I never thought about it that way before, and that's what makes them laugh. Next thing, I would say double check with people to make sure it's not just funny to you. I've seen a lot of videos about this on Instagram and things like that where writers are like, I wrote a hilarious scene, but then I gave it to my husband and he didn't laugh at all. Or I gave it to my wife and she's like, why is it funny? It's important that you double check because something that might be hilarious to you, 90% of people won't get. And you want to make sure that it is generally funny, not just specifically funny, but generally funny. That's why comedians oftentimes playtest their jokes at smaller venues or even playtest their jokes, I know that's not the proper term, but playtest their jokes at with their families or with their friends, so that way they can have people give them feedback and be like, this is why it wasn't funny, or it could be funnier if you did this. And as a result, it helps them really refine and hone their humor. You should do the exact same thing with your comedic manuscript. You should have other people read it and tell you whether or not they find it funny, and if they don't find it funny, tell you why. And maybe give suggestions as to how it could be funny or why it wasn't funny. All right, next, rule of 3. This is one of those fun ones where you probably heard the joke like, knock, knock, banana, banana who, knock, knock, banana, banana who, knock, knock. And then you're like, you don't want to say it anymore. But then you're like, okay, knock, knock, orange. And then they're like, orange who, orange, you glad I didn't say banana? So the reason that one works is because generally you're supposed to do it 3 times. It gets annoying after 3 times, which is the perfect time then to surprise them pleasantly by having something new. Same thing in writing. If you have, for example, twice that this person has been rejected, and then all of a sudden the 3rd time they are accepted, but in a funny, quirky way, where it's like, this is the worst, but we're still going to take it for these reasons, and they're like, I don't care, I'll take it. It's funny because of the fact that they've had all these normal responses. Or alternatively, you can have abnormal response, and then a normal response, and it makes the normal response even more funny because you don't see it coming. So as a result, it adds to the surprise if you have 3 times. And when I say 3 times, I mean 2 normal or abnormal, and then 1 normal or surprise. So that being said, like 2 of the same and then 1 different of whatever it is going to give you more of a laugh and more of a reaction. Last one, the novel's plot shouldn't be a joke, but also keep in mind that humor shouldn't completely distract from your plot. It is a fine line. Again, humor should enhance your plot, not distract from your plot or be your plot. You want to make sure that the plot still moves forward, A great example of this, I would say, is The Lost City of D. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. It kept the romantic part of it moving forward, it kept the action part of the story moving forward, but the comedy very much enhanced my experience and my enjoyment of that movie. All right, thank you so much, and I hope to see you at Writers Club this week. Again, reminder that is on August 29th, and this is the year 2024 in case you're watching it in the future. Thank you. Bye.